Now, Democratic Congressman André Carson of Indiana. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. I assume you've been well briefed on what's going on. What can you tell us about this manhunt for this terrorist, Salah Abdeslam? Do officials have any clue where he might be right now?
Well, I think that folks should be confident in knowing that the U.S., Belgium, and French law enforcement community has been working very closely together along with efforts from our Five Eye partners. It is clear that the recent raids and the law enforcement surge that we've seen in the past week and a half is indicative of a unified and more broadly growing global front to stop ISIL and to stop any copycat terrorists who seek to do others harm.
But they got to learn from some of the blunders that did occur, intelligence failures leading up to that horrible Friday night in Paris, if they want to avoid these kinds of terror attacks down the road. Any major blunders stick out in your mind right now?
Well, I think whenever there's a tragic incident like this, there are always lessons to be learned and takeaways. Our hearts go out to the people of France and across the globe, quite frankly, Mali, Nigeria, and other places. But whenever you have this, you always go back and Monday morning quarterback and look at strengthening and tightening internal controls. But what is more clear is that the ISIL message, the message of radicalism, the message of extremism will no longer be tolerated from the global community, the global faith community. All people are coming together, people of goodwill, and saying enough is enough.
Might that suicide vest and bolts that were found in that garbage can today in that Paris suburb be a key for investigators in pointing to who else may have been part of this attack?
Well, whenever you discover a suicide vest, it's always a unique discovery and something that could unlock other efforts that could have taken place, or it could have been in connection with the recent attacks in Paris. What is clear is that law enforcement authorities are now connecting the dots. They're shaking the trees. We're seeing a surge, as it were, and we're seeing numerous raids where we're getting the information that we need to get to the root of this problem and eliminate the cancerous threat.
I assume authorities in France, in Paris, they're looking at that suicide vest and to determine if there were any parts there. They could determine where they may have been purchased, if there are fingerprints,
Sure.
Any other evidence that could lead to more of the suspects who may still be at large.
Sure, absolutely. France has a very impressive law enforcement and intelligence apparatus, as do we. And our intelligence community, as well as our law enforcement community, the FBI, along with the CIA and other agencies, have been working with the French authorities to work collaboratively in solving these cases.
Stand by, Congressman. We have more to discuss. I want to remind our viewers also, you once served in the Department of Homeland Security, and 46 million Americans are about to be traveling during this Thanksgiving holiday week. Much more with Congressman André Carson when we come back. We're back with Democratic Congressman André Carson of Indiana. He's a member of the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, is this guy, Fabian Clan, one of the masterminds in this attack?
Well, you know, from what our reports indicate and from what I'll say is that he is certainly a person of interest. There is no safe haven for him or those like him. We are tightening the reins in the intelligence community, and I think that what you'll see in the next few months is that a lot of these so-called leaders who are actually terrorists and, might I echo, psychopath, they don't have a place to hide. This ideology that is destructive, that is counterproductive, that is manipulative, that plays on people's vulnerabilities, it is shrinking, and we will deal with the threat as an international community, isolate the threat, and ultimately eliminate the threat.
Would you have a problem if the U.S. finds out where this guy is, for the U.S. to launch a drone with a Hellfire missile and kill him?
Listen, drones have been quite controversial. We can talk about this extensively. I'll let the scholars talk about that. But I think in this instance, when you see the kinds of threats that terrorists pose, that's what drones are for, to identify the threat, isolate the threat, and eliminate the threat.
Does U.S. intelligence have any information about whether Klan or any of these other operatives out there had other cells in the works plotting specific attacks against the United States?
What we do know is that the national security community, as well as the Department of Homeland Security, has been working around the clock with state and local law enforcement. And as folks get prepared for the holiday season, we've not seen, as of yet, credible or specific reports indicating that there could be this kind of scenario like we saw in Paris. There was just an active shooter scenario that took place in New York City this past weekend, even in the subway. And similar active shooter scenarios are taking place as we speak across the country, which should give some kind of comfort to Americans that the law enforcement community is prepared and ready to fight against these extremists.
You're the only member of Congress to have also served in the Department of Homeland Security, so-called Fusion Center. You understand the threat on the ground. Is the administration right now prepared to deal with ISIS as it has evolved as a threat?
I think that President Obama has shown himself to be open to listening to military leaders. Certainly he gets a briefing daily from the CIA director and the FBI director and the intelligence community as a whole. He has shown himself to be one not trapped in rigidity, but one who understands that when there are gaps, and there have been gaps, that he's open to looking at our internal controls and constantly reviewing, asking the right questions so we can tighten the gaps and ultimately do what we have to do in terms of keeping Americans safe and keeping our global community even safer.
As you know, the New York Times reporting over the weekend that the Pentagon is now expanding an internal investigation of the U.S. military's Central Command. Analysts supposedly were offering a pretty specific, very dire assessment of what ISIS is up to, but their superiors were sugarcoating it in effect to give a more rosy assessment. What can you tell us about this?
Well, whenever you're dealing with human beings, of course, you always deal with the human element of human frailty and, of course, motivations and hidden agendas. But thankfully, I mean, the Central Command is a military command. We still have information coming from the CIA, information coming from the Department of Homeland Security, the DIA, and ultimately the FBI. And so I think that there are different intelligence tools that are being used to complete the bigger intelligence puzzle.
I want to get your reaction to what Donald Trump and some others have been saying about Muslim Americans. You're one of two Muslims to serve in the United States Congress. Keith Ellison is the other Muslim. When you hear Donald Trump suggest, for example, that there should be surveillance of certain mosques in the United States, that maybe there needs to be some sort of database to keep track of certain Muslims, what do you say to Trump?
You know, I think he's dialed back his comments. I think that Mr. Trump, who has done business with Muslims, who has Muslims working for his organization, surely beyond the rhetoric and how he presents himself, I've met Mr. Trump. I don't think he is as unreasonable as his rhetoric suggests. That's not a defense of him. I condemn the harsh language against Muslims. I don't think that any mosque or any community should be surveilled, unless you're looking at a mosque where the reasonable suspicion test has been met and the probable cause test has been met. Other than that, to surveil people just because of their religion is unconstitutional and it's un-American.
Good point. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. What an honor.
Keith Ellison, as I said before, is the other Muslim member of the House of Representatives, and André Carson is a member of the Intelligence Committee. To both of you, thanks very much for your service. Coming up.